interaction.
Put that phone away! You're interfering!
I am documenting this interaction. Do not touch me.
Hey,
said,
give me that!
Don't
move!
Let go. You're out of line, officer.
The silent witness. The heat in Meridian City that Friday afternoon was not just a temperature, it was a physical weight. It pressed down on the asphalt of the downtown district, distorting the air above the pavement into shimmering waves of haze. It was late July, the kind of day where the humidity clings to your skin the moment you step outside, making the air feel thick enough to choke on. Inside the limestone walls of the Oakmont County Justice Center, however, the air was cool, conditioned, and sterile. This was the domain of Judge Althea Sterling. At 54 years old, Judge Sterling was a woman who commanded respect not by raising her voice, but by lowering it. She had spent 14 years on the Superior Court bench, following a decade-long career as a fierce, meticulous prosecutor. She was known for her intellect, her unyielding adherence to procedure, and a gaze that could dismantle a lying witness from 50 feet away. On this particular afternoon, Althea was exhausted. She had just concluded a sentencing hearing for a high-profile fraud case that had dragged on for weeks. Her mind was a clutter of statutes, sentencing guidelines, and the heavy emotional toll of judgment. She wanted nothing more than to reach the sanctuary of her car, drive the 30 minutes to her quiet home in the terrifyingly expensive neighborhood of Highland Park, and pour herself a glass of iced tea. She removed her black judicial robes in her chambers, hanging them carefully in the closet. Beneath them, she wore a tailored cream-colored suit and a string of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. She picked up her leather briefcase, checked her phone, one missed call from her husband regarding dinner reservations, and headed for the exit. She walked out the rear doors of the courthouse, which led directly to the secure, designated parking lot for judicial staff. The lot was clearly marked. Signs posted every 10 feet read, "Reserved parking, judiciary personnel only. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed." It was a space of privilege and safety, or at least it was supposed to be. As Althea stepped into the sweltering heat, the transition was jarring. The sounds of the city, sirens in the distance, the rumble of traffic on Main Street, washed over her. She walked toward her vehicle, a dark blue Volvo sedan parked in her assigned spot, space number 42. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. She was a woman who belonged exactly where she was. But across the street, in the shadow of a parking garage entrance, Officer Silas Thorne was watching. Thorne was a 17-year veteran of the Meridian City Police Department. He was a man who wore his uniform like a suit of armor, tight across the chest, heavy with equipment. He was sweating, his patience fraying with every minute he stood in the sun. Thorne was not a happy man. His personnel file, buried deep in the archives of the department, painted a picture of an officer who struggled with authority when it wasn't his own. He had a history of attitude problems, a euphemism for a deep-seated need to dominate every interaction he was a part of. Thorne saw Althea Sterling. He didn't see a judge. He didn't see a former prosecutor. He saw a black woman in a cream suit walking through a restricted area with confidence. And in Silas Thorne's worldview, that confidence was an affront. It was a discrepancy that needed to be investigated. It was a challenge that needed to be answered. Before we see how this collision of worlds unfolds, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from today? We have a global community here committed to truth and justice. Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, please click that subscribe button. The story we are about to tell is a masterclass in why knowing your rights and having a camera can be the difference between freedom and captivity. Officer Thorne stepped off the curb. He didn't walk. He prowled. He cut across the street, dodging a taxi that honked at him, and entered the judicial lot. His hand rested habitually on his utility belt, not on his weapon, but near it. A subtle, ingrained signal of potential force. Althea had reached her car. She had her keys in her hand and was just reaching for the door handle when a voice boomed out behind her. "Hey, you! Step away from the vehicle." The voice was aggressive, lacking any of the professional courtesy usually afforded to citizens. Althea froze. Her first instinct was that she was being robbed. She turned slowly, clutching her briefcase, her eyes scanning for a threat. She saw the uniform, the badge, the nameplate that read, Thorne. Relief washed over her for a split second, followed immediately by confusion. "Excuse me, officer," she said. Her voice was calm, the practiced tone of the courtroom. "I said step away from the car," Thorne repeated, closing the distance between them. He was now 10 feet away. "This is a restricted area. Authorized personnel only. You can't be back here." Althea straightened her posture. She stood at her full height. I am aware of the restrictions, officer. That is why I am parked here. I am Judge Althea Sterling. This is my vehicle. A rational officer hearing this would have paused. They might have looked at the woman, looked at the car, and realized that a well-dressed woman with keys to a luxury sedan in a reserved spot was likely exactly who she said she was. But Thorne was not looking for an explanation. He was looking for submission. Judge, huh? Thorne sneered. The skepticism in his voice was thick enough to cut. You got some ID to prove that? Or are you just trying to talk your way out of a trespassing charge? Althea felt a flicker of irritation. It was Friday. She was tired. Officer, I have worked in this building for 14 years. My judicial ID is in my briefcase. Let's see it then, Thorne demanded. And keep your hands where I can see them. Althea placed her briefcase on the trunk of the Volvo. She unzipped it slowly, narrating her actions to ensure there was no misunderstanding. I am reaching into the front pocket to retrieve my identification. She pulled out her judicial credentials. It was a hard plastic card encased in a leather wallet featuring the gold seal of the state judiciary, her photograph, and her title in bold black letters. She held it out for him to see. Thorne glanced at it barely for a second. He didn't inspect it. He didn't call dispatch to verify the badge number. He shook his head. Looks like a fake, he said dismissively. Anyone can buy those online. I need a driver's license. I need to run you. Now, the alarm bells in Althea's head went from a low hum to a deafening ring. This was not standard procedure. This was harassment. She knew the law better than almost anyone in the state. She knew that in this jurisdiction she was not required to provide secondary identification to an officer unless there was reasonable suspicion of a crime. Standing by her own car was not a crime. She made a decision. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone. Officer, Althea said, her voice turning icy. I have identified myself. I have shown you official credentials. You are now detaining me without probable cause. I am starting a video recording for my own protection. She tapped the screen. The red light of the recording app blinked on. She held the phone up, framing Thorne in the center of the shot. The sight of the camera triggered something primal in Officer Thorne. His face flushed a deep, angry red. Put that phone away, he barked, stepping into her personal space. He was close enough now that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. You can't record me. That's interference with a police investigation. That is incorrect, Althea said, speaking clearly for the microphone. I am on public property. You are a public official performing your duties. Under the First Amendment and the ruling in Glick versus Cunniffe, I have a constitutional right to record this interaction. I am not interfering. I am standing still. I am documenting. Thorne lunged. It was a clumsy, angry motion. He reached out to snatch the phone from her hand. Althea pulled back sharply. His hand grazed her wrist. A violation. Do not touch me, Althea commanded. It was not a plea. It was an order delivered with the full weight of the superior court. You have just committed battery on a judicial officer. Step back immediately. Thorne hesitated. The ferocity of her response startled him. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. The ego is a dangerous thing, and Thorne's was currently driving the car. You're obstructing justice, Thorne shouted. I told you to stop recording. You're escalating this. I am preserving evidence, Althea countered, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. State your reasonable suspicion, officer, right now. Tell the camera what crime you believe I have committed. You fit the description, Thorne stammered, grasping for the oldest excuse in the book. We had reports of suspicious activity in the lot. Car prowlers. What description? Althea pressed. Be specific. Was the suspect a 54-year-old woman in a tailored suit? Was the suspect unlocking her own car? By now, the commotion had drawn attention. The side door of the courthouse opened, and two men stepped out. One was Henry Caldwell, another Superior Court judge and a longtime colleague of Althea's. The other was a young public defender named David Ross. They saw the scene. The blue uniform towering over the cream suit, the phone held high, the shouting. Althea, Judge Caldwell called out, confused. He hurried down the steps. What is going on here? Thorne spun around. Back off, he yelled at the newcomers. Police business. Stay back, or you'll be arrested too. Judge Caldwell stopped, his jaw dropping. Arrested? Officer, are you out of your mind? That is Judge Sterling. You are harassing a sitting judge. I don't care who she says she is, Thorne screamed, losing control of the situation entirely. She's refusing lawful orders. She's resisting. I am not resisting, Althea narrated calmly to the camera, panning slightly to show her colleagues. I am standing still. I am being detained unlawfully. Witness Judge Henry Caldwell and Attorney David Ross are present. The young attorney Ross pulled out his own phone. I'm recording too, Judge, he shouted. We see it. We see everything. Now there were 2 cameras, 2 angles, and 3 witnesses. Thorne was drowning, but he was too angry to see the water rising over his head. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, I need backup at the Justice Center lot. I have a non-compliant suspect and a hostile crowd. Send units now. Hostile crowd. He was describing 2 judges and a lawyer. The minutes that followed were excruciating. Althea remained perfectly still, holding her phone like a shield. Thorne paced back and forth, muttering to himself, his hand hovering over his taser. He glared at Caldwell and Ross, who stood their ground 10 yards away, recording. Sirens wailed in the distance, cutting through the heavy afternoon heat. 3 patrol cars screeched into the lot, lights flashing, bringing a chaotic energy to the scene. Sergeant Victor Kowalski was the first to exit the lead vehicle. He was a veteran, a man with graying hair and tired eyes who had seen it all, or so he thought. He took one look at the scene and felt his stomach drop. He saw Officer Thorne agitated and red-faced. He saw the woman in the suit, Judge Sterling, whom Kowalski recognized immediately from years of testifying in her courtroom, and he saw the other judge and the attorney recording. "Oh no," Kowalski whispered to himself. "Silas, what have you done?" He approached slowly, hands open, trying to lower the temperature of the encounter. "Officer Thorne, stand down. Talk to me. What do we have?" "She wouldn't ID, Sarge," Thorne spat, pointing an accusing finger at Althea. "She was acting suspicious by the cars. I asked for ID, she gave me some fake badge, then pulled a phone and started screaming. These other 2 tried to interfere." Althea spoke up before Kowalski could respond. "Sergeant Kowalski," she said, recognizing him. "Officer Thorne approached me while I was entering my vehicle. I provided my judicial credentials. He dismissed them. He attempted to knock my phone from my hand. He has detained me for 15 minutes without probable cause." Kowalski winced. He knew Judge Sterling. He knew she didn't lie. And he knew Thorne was a liability. He walked over to Thorne and spoke in a hushed tone. "Silas, that's Judge Sterling. You need to walk away, right now." "I'm not walking away," Thorne hissed. "She disrespected me. She refused an order." "She's a judge, you idiot," Kowalski whispered harshly. "You are ending your career right now. Let it go." Kowalski turned back to Althea. He put on his most diplomatic face. "Judge Sterling, look, I think this is all just a big misunderstanding. Officer Thorne is zealous about security. We appreciate that, right? How about we just call it a day? You put the phone away, go home, have a nice weekend. We'll handle this internally." It was a tempting offer. Althea was tired. Her feet hurt. She wanted to go home. All she had to do was stop recording, get in her car, and drive away. But then she looked at the camera lens. She thought about the young men who stood before her bench every week, men who looked like her sons, men who had been stopped by officers like Thorne, but didn't have a judicial title to protect them. She thought about the stories of evidence lost and complaints misplaced. "Sergeant," Althea said, her voice trembling slightly with rage, "are you suggesting a quid pro quo? My freedom in exchange for my silence?" Kowalski stiffened. "I'm just trying to de-escalate, Judge." "There is no de-escalation for a civil rights violation," Althea said. "I'm not going anywhere until I have Officer Thorne's badge number and a supervisor to file a formal complaint. And I want it on the record that you just attempted to coerce me into dropping this matter." Thorne heard this. The vein in his neck bulged. The realization that he couldn't bully his way out and that his supervisor was trying to fold pushed him over the edge. "That's it," Thorne shouted. "I'm done asking. You want to file a complaint? You can file it from a cell. You're under arrest." "Silas, no!" Kowalski yelled, reaching out. But Thorne was faster. He grabbed Althea's arm, twisting it behind her back with unnecessary force. "You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting," Thorne yelled. "I am not resisting," Althea said, grimacing in pain as her shoulder was wrenched. "I'm complying. Do not hurt me." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was a distinct metallic click that echoed across the parking lot. Judge Caldwell was shouting now. "You are making a mistake. A massive mistake." Thorne ignored him. He shoved Judge Althea Sterling toward his patrol car. He pushed her head down, rougher than needed, and forced her into the cramped plastic back seat of the cruiser. Althea sat in the cage. The air was stale, smelling of disinfectant and sweat. Her hands were numb behind her back. She looked out the window and saw her colleagues recording, their faces masks of horror. She kept her composure. She didn't cry. She began to plan. We are at the halfway point of this story, and the injustice is palpable. A protector of the law is now a prisoner of it. I want to pause and ask you, if you were Sergeant Kowalski in that moment, would you have physically stopped Thorne? Or would you have stood by, afraid to break the blue wall of silence? It's a difficult question. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're finding this story compelling, please like the video. It helps these stories reach more people. The ride to the precinct was short, but it felt like an eternity. Thorne drove aggressively, accelerating hard and braking late. He didn't speak. He stared straight ahead, perhaps realizing the gravity of his actions, or perhaps fuming in self-righteous indignation. Althea sat in the back, her mind racing. She was cataloging every violation. Fourth Amendment, unlawful seizure. First Amendment, retaliation for recording. 14th Amendment, due process. She memorized the time. She memorized the route. When they arrived at the Meridian City Police headquarters, Thorne dragged her out of the car. He marched her through the booking area. The station was busy. Officers were processing arrests, chatting, drinking coffee. When Thorne walked in with a woman in a cream suit and pearls, the room went quiet. The booking sergeant, a woman named Perez, looked up. Her eyes went wide. She knew Judge Sterling. She had processed warrants signed by her hundreds of times. "Thorne," Sergeant Perez said slowly. "Who is that?" "Suspect," Thorne grunted. "Disorderly. Failure to ID." Althea looked Sergeant Perez in the eye. "Sergeant, I am Judge Althea Sterling. I have been arrested unlawfully. I demand to speak to your watch commander immediately." Perez stood up. "Thorne, take the cuffs off. Now." "She's a prisoner," Thorne insisted. "She's a Superior Court judge, you moron," Perez shouted. "Take them off before the chief sees this." Thorne hesitated, but the authority in Perez's voice broke through his haze. He unlocked the cuffs. Althea rubbed her wrists. There were deep red welts forming where the metal had dug into her skin. She didn't thank them. She didn't ask for water. She asked for her phone. "I need to make a call," she said. She didn't call her husband. She called Marcus Cole. Marcus Cole was the top civil rights attorney in the state. He was a shark in a three-piece suit, a man who had sued the city so many times he had his own parking spot at the federal courthouse. "Marcus," Althea said when he answered. "It's Althea. I'm at City Central booking. I've been arrested." There was a pause on the line. Then Marcus's voice, cold and dangerous. "Don't say another word. I'm on my way. And Althea, we're going to burn them down." Althea was released on her own recognizance 2 hours later. She walked out of the police station into a sea of flashing lights. Her colleagues had not been idle. The video footage had already been shared with the local news. The story was breaking live. Althea stood on the steps of the precinct. She looked disheveled, her suit wrinkled, her wrists bruised, but her eyes were clear. She approached the microphones. "Today," she said, her voice projected to the back of the crowd, "I was treated like a criminal because an officer did not like my questions. I was arrested because my rights were inconvenient to his ego. If this can happen to a judge in her own courthouse, God help the citizens of this city who do not have my title. This ends today." The lawsuit was filed the next morning, Sterling versus City of Meridian et al. It was a federal civil rights suit alleging false arrest, excessive force, malicious prosecution, and systemic failure to train. The discovery phase of the trial was where the true horror was revealed. Marcus Cole and his team didn't just want justice for Althea. They wanted to put the entire department on trial. They demanded Officer Thorne's complete personnel file. The city fought it. They claimed privacy. They claimed irrelevance. But the federal judge overseeing the case, a no-nonsense jurist named Judge Robert Vance, ordered the files released. What they found was a pattern of predation. Officer Thorne had 17 prior complaints. 17? There was Dr. Aris Thorne, no relation, a neurosurgeon who had been pulled over for driving too slowly in his Porsche and held for an hour while Thorne searched his car without a warrant. Complaint outcome unsubstantiated. There was Professor Lydia Grant, a university dean arrested for loitering while waiting for an Uber outside a restaurant. Complaint outcome unsubstantiated. Every single complainant was a black professional. Every single incident involved Thorne demanding ID, escalating when questioned, and using the charge of disorderly conduct to punish non-compliance. But the smoking gun wasn't in the official files. It was in the text messages. The court ordered the release of Thorne's work phone data. The texts between Thorne and a group of other officers were shocking. They referred to the courthouse parking lot as the hunting ground. They bragged about taking the elites down a peg. One text sent by Thorne just 20 minutes before he arrested Althea read, "Bored. Gonna go see if I can find someone to mess with in the VIP lot. These people think they own the place." It was premeditated. It was malicious. It was a game to him. The deposition of Officer Thorne was a spectacle. He sat across the table from Althea and Marcus Cole. He looked smaller out of uniform. Without the badge and the gun, he was just a man caught in a lie. "Officer Thorne," Marcus Cole asked, projecting the video of the arrest on the wall. "In this video, Judge Sterling is citing Glick versus Cuniff. Are you familiar with that case?" "No," Thorne mumbled. It is the Supreme Court case that establishes the right to record police, Cole said. Did your department train you on this? I don't recall. You don't recall if you were trained on the Constitution? Cole asked, raising an eyebrow. I felt threatened, Thorne said, falling back on the standard defense. Threatened by what? Cole pointed to the screen. By a grandmother in pearls holding an iPhone? Or were you threatened by the fact that she knew the law better than you did? Thorne stayed silent. There was no answer that could save him. The city saw the writing on the wall. The text messages, the video, the prior complaints. It was a catastrophic liability. The mayor, facing an election year and a furious public, instructed the city attorney to settle. They offered $5 million. Althea refused. They offered $10 million. Althea refused. It's not about the money, Althea told her lawyer. I want change. I want a consent decree. A consent decree is a court-enforced agreement that mandates specific reforms. It brings the federal government in to oversee the police department. It is the nuclear option for police reform. The city fought hard, but the public pressure was overwhelming. Protests were held outside City Hall daily. The video of the arrest had been viewed 50 million times globally. Finally, the city caved. The settlement was finalized 6 months after the arrest. The city of Meridian agreed to pay Judge Althea Sterling $18.5 million in damages. It was the largest individual civil rights settlement in the history of the state. But the money was just the beginning. The settlement included a legally binding agreement to overhaul the police department. It mandated independent oversight, a civilian review board with the power to fire officers, mandatory training, comprehensive constitutional law, training for all officers with annual recertification, zero tolerance, automatic termination for any officer found to have turned off a body camera or retaliated against a citizen for recording. And as for Officer Silas Thorne, he was fired, of course, but Althea wasn't done. She pushed the district attorney to bring charges, and because the DA knew Althea's power, and because the evidence was undeniable, they did. Thorne was charged with deprivation of rights, under color of law, a federal crime. He pled guilty to avoid a lengthy trial. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The police chief resigned in disgrace. Sergeant Kowalski took early retirement to avoid being demoted. 1 year later, Althea Sterling drove her blue Volvo into the courthouse parking lot. The sun was shining, but the heat wasn't quite as oppressive. She parked in space 42. She got out of her car. She looked across the street to the spot where Thorne had stood. It was empty. She walked toward the courthouse, her heels clicking on the concrete. A new sign had been posted at the entrance of the lot. It didn't just say reserved. It listed the rights of citizens to observe and record police activity in public spaces. Althea smiled, just a little. She adjusted her pearls, picked up her briefcase, and walked inside to do her job. She had been a victim. She had been a prisoner. But today, she was just the judge. And justice, she knew, was a heavy gavel to swing. But she would swing it until her arm gave out. This story serves as a stark reminder. Judge Sterling had the knowledge, the resources, and the platform to fight back. But for every Judge Sterling, there are thousands of people who are silenced, intimidated, and processed through a system that doesn't care about their rights. What would you have done if you were in her shoes? Would you have had the courage to keep recording? Justice was served here, but only because she forced it to be. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please subscribe to the channel. We are building a library of truth here, and we need you with us. Until next time, stay safe, know your rights, and never stop recording.